Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman. And today we're going to be talking about out-of-area leads in your Google Ads PPC campaigns. A lot of people don't realize this, but they're spending a massive amount of money on these leads that aren't even in their market. There are 8 things that you can do to prevent these leads the best they could possibly be prevented. And we're going to be going through that 8-part checklist in the podcast today. How you doing today, Garrett?
Doing great. How are you?
Hey, doing awesome. Excited for our topic today. For those of you that don't remember Garrett, I feel like it's been a minute since you've been on the podcast, Garrett. He's our internal genius. I think I make up a different marketing title for you each time because you wear a few hats, but Garrett's the man he's the man under the hood, making a lot of the stuff that we do at work. So it's always a good opportunity to pick his brain and talk about one of these topics.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So today, the topic that we're talking about is out-of-area leads. And specifically, there are 8 things that you can do in Google Ads to prevent out-of-area leads if you're a real estate investor. And what we see is really common. I don't know if you agree with me, Garrett. I feel like this is like top 3 for sure in terms of issues that people express that they're having with the Google Ads campaigns. Because it feels obvious, right? It feels I hired this agency and I told them to get me leads in Tampa and they got me a lead in Washington. And that's pure incompetence, right? And actually not really. Like out-of-area leads are a normal thing. Like you will get out-of-area leads. However, usually what we find, these people come to us when we audit the accounts, is we find that they're doing some things to try to target their leads geographically, but they're not doing everything that you can. And the more things you do, the greater you can control this, right? So it's really common that people are doing 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things to prevent out-of-area leads. And it's very uncommon that they're doing 8 things, all these 8 things I'm going to mention here to prevent out-of-area leads. So think of this like a checklist. We're going to be going through these one by one, and we're just going to be talking about what is this? Why does it matter? How does it prevent out-of-area leads? And if you get all these right, then you can decrease the number of out-of-area leads you're getting pretty significantly. And some of our clients, honestly, get very few out-of-area leads. Some clients in some markets get more. I think we're averaging something like 8% of leads out of area, like across the whole. So don't get me wrong, this is a problem that can only be mitigated to some extent, but it can be mitigated quite a bit.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's jump into it. I've got the first 2 here because they're pretty fast, they're pretty easy, and Garrett's going to help us out with number 3. Number 1 here, target the right areas. This almost sounds too dumb to explain. However, the number of circumstances where we've had an investor come to us saying, and getting leads out of the areas I want to get leads in. And we audit their account and we find that the place where they're getting leads that they don't want to get leads in is actually one that they're targeting in the account is a large enough number of investors. I couldn't fit it on one hand. I couldn't fit it on 2 hands. This has happened a lot of times where someone's, for some reason my campaigns keep producing leads in Michigan. And then we look in there and they're targeting Michigan. It's like, surprise. This is like the actual like pure incompetence that can happen with this. Obviously, you have to target the right areas, and this comes. There's a couple different flavors to this. One of them, like we've seen in some circumstances, that I'm in Tampa and I'm getting leads in Michigan, and they literally are targeting Michigan in their campaign. That happens sometimes. That requires a lot of negligence to happen, but it can happen. But the other thing that's actually really common is sometimes you say, I want leads in the Atlanta metro. And then the agency, for example, targets the Atlanta metro in Google, and that actually includes even parts of Alabama. It includes very wide around Atlanta, and you're getting some of these rural leads, maybe that are a little bit outside of your target market. So a lot of these come like in little miscommunications around what exactly is targeted, what's not targeted. And what you say that you think might be clear, like you could say, I want to target Atlanta, and that could mean 6 different things to 6 different people. So this is where you have to get really clear about what exactly is good for us and what is not. That's pretty common. So the way that you do this is in Google Ads, you can click on the campaign and then you click on the locations tab on the left-hand side. And Google will actually give you this pretty map that shows in blue all the areas you're targeting. And you just got to make sure if it's blue, it's something that I want. It's as simple as that. And you don't let just the thing to remember is even a little hole is enough to sink a ship. Your targeting can be mostly good places. And then you have just a few bad places in there. And you're like, oh, for the most part, it's good. But you always run that risk that you're going to get 90% of your leads from those bad places, especially if they're bad for your competition too. So then what you'll find is the campaign just dumps a lot of spend in that little area because it's the least competitive and leads are the cheapest there. So those are some things to be careful with, but the principle here is you got to target the right areas. And that can actually go relatively in depth. We have a number of podcasts in the past. If you just want to search it, like location targeting, you can see we have some podcast episodes in the past going deep into what defines the right areas. But in some cases, this is just way off. Some people are literally just targeting their own state. I'll take the second one too. You can also add negative locations in the wrong areas. And I'll explain briefly how this works. So Google has a positive targeting inclusion. This is what's going to show up as blue on the map. And it also has a negative targeting exclusion. That's going to show up as red on the map. So the way it works is you could, for example, say, I want to target Florida, but I don't want to target Orange County. And then you could just target Florida, but have that like box excluding Orange County. So really, if you think about it, a location can be targeted or not targeted in one of three ways. It could either be blue, targeted, or red, excluded, or neutral, which is neither targeted nor excluded. And it's really normal to hear that and just say, what's the difference between something that's excluded and something that's just not targeted? And it actually does matter. So if you look at how the targeting works in Google, it uses something called presence. In presence, as you would naturally assume it would mean, like Garrett, if I tell you like I'm present in this place, you can only assume that like I'm present in one place at a time. But as Google defines it, you could be present in multiple places at the same time. Because what Google says is presence means you're in or regularly in that location. And any person, unless they don't ever move, is always in or regularly in multiple locations. So it could be that, I'll just give you an example. Let's just say there's somebody who works in Atlanta and they live out in the suburbs. They're commuting back and forth. They are regularly in Atlanta. They are also regularly in the suburbs of Atlanta. And let's just say someone only wanted Atlanta proper for their campaigns to be targeted, which is actually really rare. The suburbs are actually good, but just for the sake of example, right? What that person, if they just targeted Atlanta, that person would be targeted because they're regularly in Atlanta. But if they were to target Atlanta and exclude the suburbs, then that person who often goes back and forth between them, they would be excluded from that targeting because the exclusion trumps the inclusion. I'll give you like the quick summary of what we do. Our default with clients is we don't do a lot of negative locations. We just target locations because the problem is sometimes those people who are in multiple areas, they make up a good portion of the traffic. And if we exclude them, then we're going to increase our cost per lead, which is not good. However, if we start to have some out of area leads issues and we see that this is like one of those accounts, one of those campaigns, one of those markets where this is more of a problem, sometimes we'll add these exclusions. And what that'll do is it'll raise the cost per lead a tiny bit because we're going to be excluding some people, but it'll also clean up that quality. Like that person who works in Atlanta and they live in Atlanta, we're more confident that they live in Atlanta than that person who goes back and forth. So we just exclude that person who goes back and forth. And while that will increase your cost per lead, sometimes it decreases your cost per lead in the area that you care about if you're getting a lot of those leads from outside of those areas. So this is one, we don't do this in every account every time, but if we see problems, we'll exclude it. We'll find a lot of agencies will just exclude it all the time. And a lot of their clients are just suffering from a higher cost per lead than they could have in circumstances where it's not actually that big of a deal in their specific market. So that's why we default to the lower cost per lead option. But if it's a problem, we'll clean it up. So that's targeting. Again, remember, there's blue, neutral, and red. Red are exclusions. It's a little bit confusing. But sometimes if you want to get really controlled about where your leads are coming from, not only do you have to target the right areas, but you have to exclude targeting in all the wrong areas. And that's just one of those things you can do to bring that percentage of those wrong leads down a little bit.
Yeah, it's like the idea of Occam's razor, where like the simplest answer often is the answer, where it's probably there's better odds that the issue with your leads being out of market isn't some like really high tech bug in your form or your site or your like hosting system. It might just be because you're like targeting those areas. And I think as marketers and in general, like people like to look for the really complex thing because they assume that they have the basics in place. But I think it's worth like checking everything, even the dumb stuff, because everyone makes mistakes and misses things that they don't always, that they know are mistakes. So I think that's just a lesson in being thorough when you're trying to solve a problem and not jump to like the really complex automation or
Yeah, if you're a business owner and you haven't seen like the map inside of Google Ads showing where you're targeting, where you're neutral, where you're excluding, you should see that. Because I'm telling you, if you take this mindset to it, you'll often find something wrong with it. Maybe it's minor, right? Maybe it's just, wait, we still have that county on there. I forgot we don't really do business in that county anymore, but we weren't getting a lot of leads from it. It's not a huge deal, but like we just saved 5% of our budget by cutting that out. And sometimes it's really something major, but it's definitely something for the amount of time it takes to look at an image and say, yes, it's good or not. It's totally worth it for your time. But that is the obvious stuff. The rest of these 6 items, we're getting a little bit deeper into stuff that you probably would never even think to look for. Let's talk about the specific hidden settings. Garrett's going to share here about a setting that you have to actually be like looking really close to find in Google. Like it's not like it's just one click away. You actually have to click like the more settings option within a specific category because Google doesn't want you to really see this. But and the default is actually what's worse for you, but kind of makes a massive difference.
yeah. So inside of the settings of each campaign, there's a section where you pick the areas that you're going to target. And there's two options that Google can pick from as far as what it uses to decide whether a person is or isn't in the areas that you've chosen. The first one is presence, which you mentioned is like they're in the area now or they're frequently in the area. The other is presence or interest, where not only does it say, yes, they're in it if they're in it now or often there, but it also will include them if they have interest in that area. So if their search history or their browsing history indicates in the eyes of Google that they have an interest in that area. This setting can be helpful at times if, let's say, you're buying like vacant land because often the owner of the lot isn't actually they don't live in the market. That can be useful. So again, like there's times where it does make sense, but in general, that's going to get people that are looking at moving possibly to that market or they have a family in that market or just a lot of reasons that they could be researching that market, but they're not actually there. And so that's a really easy thing to miss because like you mentioned, that's the default setting in Google Ads and it wastes a lot of budget. A way to see where your clicks are is there's a setting in the ad account called matched locations where it shows you the actual cities and counties where your ads have run and where they've had clicks. And that's a great way to just do a spot check of let's see where Google thinks these people are. It still can't have errors, but that's a place to go in and check and see what areas it's currently running ads to beyond just looking at your like settings in the campaign.
And I can tell you where this is like really popular is, for example, in travel. And let's just say I'm targeting Mexico and I have a hotel in Mexico, for example, and I just want to target people who are interested in Mexico. So maybe if they're searching from Canada and they're saying like best hotel in Mexico, then maybe they can see my ad. But in the real estate industry, while we do have absentee owners, it just misfires so much. We find if the settings on, we get just massive number of leads that are not what we're looking for. And there might be a few absentee owners in there that we get that we couldn't have gotten otherwise. But for the most part, it doesn't work very well. This has been our experience. So that's a pretty big one where I would say for most people, just don't second guess it. Just move to the presence setting, move away from interest. Yep. The next one, this is number 4. I'll take this and I'll tell a story for where this came from. Because in fact, this doesn't actually solve location problems, but it solves perceived location problems. So we had somebody reach out to us recently through sales. And they said, my problem is I'm getting bad location leads in my campaign. So we looked through their campaign, we're trying to figure out what's wrong. We end up finding that it turns out they're getting a lot of spam in their campaign. And that spam they're getting happens to be from really random locations. So if you were to look at the leads they're getting, Maybe they're getting some real leads that are in the city that they're targeting, but then they're getting from all around the United States these random addresses and phone numbers that don't work. So what they came to us thinking was they had a location problem with their leads. And they're not the only one. We've had many conversations like this. They thought they had a location problem with their leads because when they get these leads out of their area, they're just like not even really caring about the quality of the lead anyways, because they didn't want to do business with that seller. But nowadays, after some of these experiences, one of the first questions I ask when someone says I'm getting out of area leads is, are they real qualified, motivated seller leads that are just not in your area? Or is it possible they're just spam? Because if they're spam, it doesn't matter where they're from. They're fake in the first place. And the biggest cause of this kind of spam is actually something called Google Search Partners. When you go to advertise on Google, this is another one of those things like that location setting. You can, by default, if you just leave it and you don't do anything with it, you're going to target search partners, but you don't want to. You have to manually go in, you have to remove it. But search partners is like affiliated search engines with Google that allow Google to sell their ad inventory. The problem with it being affiliated search engines and not Google itself is they have incentive for click fraud. So all these individual websites have incentive to create the illusion of traffic and clicks on their website without it being real. So search partners tends to be loaded with click fraud. And what you have is all these people who are basically searching from these click farms, and then they're trying to click on your ad. And then they're trying to once in a while fill out a form with just whatever bogus information. So it looks to Google like it's legitimate traffic that really has an intent of doing business with the company or something. And when you look into it, you'll find it's just random addresses, it's random phone numbers. It's not like they're not real leads. And they tend to be from random locations. And that's why we start to think that it's maybe a location issue. But the root of that issue is that those leads aren't even real people in the first place. And the fact that they put in, you're trying to target Florida and they put in a Michigan address is actually irrelevant because they don't even own a house in Michigan. They're just a spam bot that's trying to waste your ad budget so that they can make money. So that's people search partners. And there's a number of issues that can come from targeting search partners. This is another one of those where I would say every campaign in the real estate investing industry should have search partners turned off. And despite me saying that, probably, I don't know what you would say, Garrett, like probably 50% of the audits we do, people coming to us that have issues in their campaigns, probably 50% of them are targeting search partners on some level. Sometimes it's a smaller amount, sometimes it's a larger amount. So it's like everybody knows it, but nobody does it. Nobody has like quality control to make sure it gets done every time and that kind of thing. Even from agencies that like know this kind of stuff, they just have random accounts that don't get processed exactly as they intend them to get it. And they target search partners on accident. And poor location leads are one of the symptoms there. So that's one that you want to check. It's in the settings. It's just networks that you want to target and you want to turn off display, turn off search partners.
Yeah, I have a great example of this. I hope that this person doesn't listen to our podcast. But if they do, this isn't about you. This is about someone else, I promise. I got brought on to do an audit in a sales conversation. And on the call, it was the owner of the business. And they're like the person that was currently like doing their ads, like a contractor. And we're like, we've had the biggest issue with spam. We've tried everything. We've tried landing pages. We tried ad copy, all these things. And they're like, we just cannot figure it out. And I like open up their ad account and in a minute I go, guys, I'm going to just cut you off there. Like, I already know the issue. You've had ads running on this setting. And the guy that was running their ads, I watched his face drop like he'd seen a corpse. And it was the saddest moment I've ever had in sales. I felt like I like took the man's life. But it was easy, and this guy had run ads for years, and even he made this error. And so it's a great way to waste a lot of budget is having that on. And if it is on, it's a very easy thing to change and remove. But it's the Google tax on beginners is they have that activated by default, and so they're hoping that you make that mistake once, and that's how they get a little bit out of people that don't have all the experience.
Yeah, super fair point. Let's talk about how your keywords can affect your locations. I think that's what are we on 5?
Yes. Yeah. Let's say that everything's dialed in with your locations, your presence settings. You don't have on anything with partners in search, but you still are getting traffic that's out of market. a common thing is a person that's in your market is searching for things like buy my house in insert state acronym, right? Let's say that I operate in Maine and I have a search term for someone who's trying to sell their house in, let's say, Orlando. By the looks of all of the signals, this looks like a good lead to Google. They're in your market, they're making a good search, but their search term includes a city or a state that is not in your market. That can be really hard to take out because there's tons of different variations of acronyms and cities and counties and zip codes and state names, and it can get really easy to miss things over time. And what we do, or what we did, was we pulled from a database the name of every city and every county in the US and threw it into AI and had it make a list of negative keywords broken out by state, where it gave every variation of each state its acronyms, ways that they're misspelled, all of the cities, ways that they're misspelled. And then when we onboard a client, we add on all of those different keywords that are for states or cities that are out of the market of that client. And it's a very effective way to get all of those out of market searches that otherwise would get through, and do it before you pay for that click and see it just in your list of search terms that you've already bid on. Just do it in bulk proactively.
Yeah, I love that. And to be really clear about who this prevents, what this prevents is you getting leads from the absentee owner who lives where you are but has a house somewhere else. So this is the person that's searching from Orlando about how do I sell my house in Georgia. And I can tell you how most agencies usually deal with this. Most just don't touch it. Those that are a little bit better, what they'll do is they'll be going through the search terms and they should be cleaning those up and removing stuff that we don't want, right? So they would go in there and they'd say, oh, sell my house in Georgia. That's not where we want to be. Let me exclude that. And that's nice and all. But what a lot of people don't realize is when you're excluding search terms, you had to pay for it to get it on your list. And then you exclude it. And then it won't come again, right? So then next week, you're going to get one from Sell My House Fort Worth, and you're going to be like, oh, that's not what we're looking for. Let me exclude that. And you're just going to keep on playing this game. And maybe in 5 years, you're going to have a negative keyword list sufficient enough from a location standpoint that you don't have to keep on paying $50 for every single state and city and abbreviation that could exist in the United States. Or you could just take one proactive swing and you could say, anything that includes a state abbreviation or a state name or a city name from a major city that is not in the areas I'm interested in, I'm going to exclude all that stuff from the get-go. It just saves you a ton of money. I don't think our clients realize how much money that saves them, because otherwise they would still get there eventually, but it would take them years. And they would just, it's one of those things where it's not going to like bankrupt you. We're talking like a few % of your spend. That's, the agencies don't charge that much as a percentage of spend. Like an agency could easily provide value worth 25% of what you pay them simply by getting a proactive negative keyword list in there, which makes a huge difference. So I love that one. And I have never seen an account that's not ours that does this in this industry. I don't see why other people do it. I just see people sometimes just like excluding them, but they're just playing like whack-a-mole with search terms. Let me hit that one. More are popping up all the time instead of just being proactive about it.
Yep.
Cool. Let's jump into the next one. Ad copy. So one of the things that's really important in pay-per-click marketing is because it's pay-per-click, your goal is let's not let anybody click who's not actually our target seller that we want to work with. All right, so that's why your ad has to be something that, yes, that person wants to click on, but also that the person who's not the right seller doesn't want to click on. And one of the biggest things you can do for that is put your ad copy specifically in your ad. And when you do that, or put your ad copy in your ad, put your location specifically is where you want to buy houses. Because then, like through all this, we try to target the right areas and stuff, but like the internet's a fuzzy place. It's not like we're just like direct mailing people at their address where they live. There's a reason out of area leads happen. It's because it can't be controlled perfectly. Google doesn't know exactly where every person with every device lives. So you're going to get stray people searching that'll see your ad. And if you have ad copy that turns them away, if they're not in one of your target locations, you're going to decrease the number of people who are clicking on that are in the wrong location, which is actually a really good thing for you because you won't have to pay for those clicks. So this is as easy as just putting that in your ad somewhere and just helps to qualify the right people. It's a simple measure. It's not going to be like better day, but we're just talking like all 8 of these things, or you add them all together, you're going to decrease your number of out of area leads pretty significantly. This one might just a little bit affect that, but in conjunction with everything else, it can be a big impact. All right, Garrett, let's talk about the next one, specifically lead sculpting, which I think is something that most people don't think about in the context of out of area leads. But let's talk about the system you set up for this.
Yeah, so just for those who don't know what this term means, the way that we optimize for driving better leads is we use a dynamic form that only reports back that a click did actually take the action that we want it to, is if it reaches a certain branch of the form. And one way we do that is we have our form branch based on the IP address of the user, and we have it based on just are they or are they not in the US. That's a safer way for us to get out the really obvious, clear out of market leads. And so if a lead comes through with an IP address that's out of the US, they still, from their end of things, are still able to go through our form, and they can still submit their information in case there's some way to still get some value from that lead. But in the eyes of Google or Facebook, that lead is not going to fire in the ad account as a conversion, because our form served to remove that lead from the data that was being fed back into Facebook. That way it doesn't get a false positive signal that's the kind of user that we want it to spend more budget on.
Yeah, because when those, like, you will have targeting just in the United States, and you will find that you get a bunch of leads like spam type stuff with IP addresses outside the United States sometimes. And it's really frustrating. You can block all the best that you can and it's still going to come through. The best thing you can do in that circumstance is try to get rid of it, but let's not be giving Google high fives every time we get one of those. We want to try to algorithm, and we'll try to veer away from that. So that's really smart. All right, this brings us to the very last point, which is VPN blocking. This kind of falls in some ways in a similar vein here. If somebody's searching with a VPN, more likely than not, they are spoofing their location and they're not actually searching from the location that it appears that they're searching from. VPNs you can find are almost always going to be spam or out of area leads. So one of the things that we do is we try to block VPNs, and we block this even not on the lead level, just on the IP address level. So if you get a click from a VPN, we will then block that IP address to not get more clicks from that same VPN. There's no way to block them, so you just never get a VPN to click on your ad at all. But you'll find that they're often clicking multiple times, and you can prevent the later clicks by just blocking it after you see that first click. So the way you do this, you could always do this manually, although it's a horrible pain. You'll never do it fast enough to prevent the multiple clicks. The way to do it really instantaneously so that you can get in there even before they click multiple times, like within the same few minutes or hour, is a software called ClickCease. And ClickCease has, you hook it up to your Google Ads account, you put a code on your landing page that monitors the traffic, and it notices when there's a VPN on your landing page, and then it takes that IP address and it blocks it in the Google Ads account. And you do that, and what you'll find is that a little bit of your wasted spend that's going to that kind of traffic will be cut down. And also you'll get less leads in that appear to be out of area, although you'll find in most cases that those were spam anyways. And this is similar to search partners. It's in that category of it looks like out of area, but really it's just spam. So ClickCease, we do recommend it. It's how much does it cost these days? Like $50 a month or something? It's not horribly expensive. If you're a Bateman Collective client, we pay for it for you. We have our own account. We'll have it set up, automatically excluding this. And actually, we'll automatically exclude any VPNs that pop up for any of our clients from your account, so that if they were going to click on someone else's ad and now they're going to go click on your ad, they're never going to get quite that far. So that's one thing that makes it even a little bit more powerful. But yeah, ClickSeeds is a good software for it. And it's, again, not going to be drastic, but with all these things, like each one's just a little bit different, a little bit of a difference that it makes to your out of area leads. We find if we do all 8 of these things, we can pretty significantly cut down the number of out of area leads. And if you're doing all these things and you're still getting some out of area leads, like we have some clients once in a while that'll have a bigger problem with it. You'll find it flows up and down sometimes, and it's a little bit hard to control. But this is, as far as I'm aware, the most exhaustive list that there can be for controlling out of area leads. If you do all these things, then you're doing everything under your control to minimize those. And beyond that point, you just kind of have to account for out of area leads as a cost of doing business. That's my mindset towards all things like this. Like our job as business owners is we have to do everything that could be feasibly done to optimize our business as much as possible. And the variation we're going to have after that, it's a cost of doing business. And as long as we're doing all the right things, then we should have less of those problems than our competitors have. And it will still serve us in the long term. So that's all I've got for this episode. Garrett, anything you'd add before we wrap this up?
No, but that was great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to everybody listening to this, for listening through the 8-part checklist of random technical Google Ads stuff. But I'm telling you, take this checklist to your account. You'll find in most circumstances that you're not doing all 8 of these things, and you can definitely save some money. So the boring stuff is where you find the money. I can guarantee that. All right. Thank you. I will see you next week.